Good morning, year one. Friday morning, last day of the week. I hope you're all okay, and I hope that you're managing okay with the maths this week. Today we're going to look at something different again. So we've looked at 2D shapes, properties of 2D shapes, symmetry, so symmetrical patterns, lines of symmetry and how many lines of symmetry shapes have, and making and showing the other half of a shape so that it is symmetrical. Okay, today we're going to start looking at fractions of amounts within a shape. We have very briefly looked before. We've done it quite a bit on fractions of numbers, so we've looked at halves and quarters before, and remember how we write those. So if we're looking for half of something, this is how we would write it as the word, but actually when in maths we will see it as numbers. So half looks like that, 1 over 2, and I'll show you why. Okay, so if you think about a shape or anything, number of amount, but if we were to look at a square, okay, so if we were to look at a square and I said to you, I'd like you to show me half of that shape, okay? Now, remember, half is where we're splitting it exactly into two. So we have two sides that are the same size, okay? So we've got two sides split exactly in half, okay? Now, the reason half is written like this is because there are two parts. Can you see we've got 1, 2. The bottom number is how many parts we have all together. So we have 2. If I wanted you to show me half of that, so if I said to you, can you shade in half of this square, you would be shading this bit here, okay? Now, how many bits have I shaded? I've only shaded 1. So my fraction is I've shaded 1 part out of 2, okay? And that is a half. 1 out of 2 is a half. If I was to shade 2 halves like that, if somebody said to me, can you shade 2 halves? Okay, that fraction would look like that because we're shading 2 parts out of 2, which means we're shading all of it. So actually, if you look carefully, you can see the top number of the fraction is the same as the bottom number of the fraction. Okay, so the top number is the same as the bottom number. Whenever the top number is the same as the bottom number, that is the same as one whole. Okay, so if they are the same number at the top and the bottom, that is 1. Okay, so as you can see, I've shaded 2 parts out of 2, which means I have shaded the whole. I've shaded 1, I've shaded it all, okay? That's a whole, that's a 1, okay? 1 square, I've shaded it all, okay? So it's really good to remember that 1/2, that fraction there, means 1 part out of 2, okay? And then if you 2 parts out of 2 means a whole, okay? So what I want you to look at now is I would like you to speak to the adult that's with you. Look at the shape I've drawn. I would like you to shade half, okay? I'm going to put it like this. I would like you to shade half of that shape. Now remember, how do we write the fraction half? Good, we write it 1 over 2. So how many bits am I going to shade? Remember, the top part of the fraction is the amount I'm going to shade in. Okay, so I'm going to shade in 1 part. So shade in 1. Okay, and then I have shaded 1/2 of the shape. Okay, I've shaded one part out of two. What would you do if somebody said to you, can you shade two halves? What would that be? What is two halves the same as? Good, it's the same as one whole. Yeah, because the top number and the bottom number are the same, so that makes it a whole. Okay, so if I was asked to shade two halves, it would look like that. I will have shaded the whole of the shape, one whole, okay, one whole, sorry, two halves. Okay, now sometimes you might get a shape that looks a bit like this. Okay. Okay, so you might get a shape that looks a bit like this. Okay, and it might say to you that you need to shade one half. Okay, so you need to shade a half. Okay, now if you look carefully, how many parts have I got in my shape? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 parts. But somebody's asked me to shade a half. How am I going to do that? Talk to the adult that's with you and think about how would you shade a half? A really good thing to remember is we're still shading 1 out of every 2. Okay, so even though there's 4, we still shade 1 out of every 2. So I would shade 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so I have shaded 2 parts out of 4, which is the same as 1 out of every 2. Okay, can you see? I've shaded 1, haven't shaded 2. Shaded 1, haven't shaded 2. You don't have to show it like that. You could show it like that because you still shaded 2 out of 4. Okay, so that's a really good way of remembering it. And if you wanted to, you could even look and say, right, I've shaded 2 out of 4. If I halve these numbers, I actually get a half. So 2 out of 4 is the same as 1 out of 2. Okay, tricky. Fractions are very, very tricky. But the way to remember with shading in amounts of shape is look at the top number, look at the bottom number. So you know you need to shade 1 out of every 2. Okay, so let's look at another one together. Right, I'd like you to it's not very well drawn, but it gives you an idea. Okay, so if you had this one, speak to the person next to you or whoever's with you. How would you shade half of that shape? How would you shade half of it? Look at the 2 numbers of the fraction. So again, you need to shade 1 bit out of every 2. Okay, so you shade 1, not the second one, 1, not the second one. So again, you shaded half, okay, because you shaded 1, not 2. You shaded 1, not 2. So you shaded 1 out of every 2. Okay, so if I was to change that, I'm going to keep the same shape because it makes it a little bit easier. similar shape. And I ask you to shade this amount. Now, does anyone remember what that fraction is called? Does anybody remember? We have looked at it, but not for a long time. The 1 over the 2 is half. 1 over the 4 always means a quarter. So this means a quarter. Okay, so that is a quarter of a shape. Okay, so you've got a quarter, 1 out of 4. Okay, so if you look carefully, if I wanted to shade you to shade 1/4 of that shape, I would like you to shade 1 bit out of 4. Okay, so the way I would do that is I'd go, right, I need to shade 1, 2, no, 3, no, 4, no. Okay, so I only need to shade 1 bit out of 4. Okay, that's 1/4, 1 bit out of 4. Okay, if I was to change my top number and say, could you show me that fraction? Now you need to shade 2 bits out of 4. So I would look at the top number and say, right, I need to shade 2 bits out of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, because I only need to shade 2, not 4 or 3. Okay, I would need to shade 3 if I had a 3 up there. Okay, if I put a 3 there, then I would need to shade 1, 2, 3 parts out of 4. Okay, so 3 parts out of 4. What would happen if I asked you to shade that amount? Speak to the person that's with you. What would happen? Good, you would have to shade all of it because you've got 4 and 4. So the two numbers, the top and the bottom, are the same. So what does that make it the same as? 1 whole. Okay, so you've got 1 whole. So you've got to shade 4 parts out of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 parts out of 4 is 1 whole. So you colour the whole thing is shaded. Okay, right, now what happens if I ask you, make it a bit bigger this time, my shape. Okay, this time I would like you to shade a quarter. Okay, so we get rid of that because that doesn't equal 1 because we haven't got the same number at the top and the bottom. I'd like you to shade 1/4. So look at the top number. How many are we shading? 1 out of how many? 4. So you're going to go 1, yes, 2, 3, 4, 1, yes, 2, 3, 4. So now we have shaded 1 out of every 4 bits. Okay, so 1/4, 1 out of 4. Okay, this is actually 2 out of 8, which is the same as 1 out of 4. Yeah, because if I look at 2 and 8 and I halve them so that the 2 becomes a 1 and the 8 becomes a 4, so it's actually the same fraction. Okay, tricky. Fractions are very, very tricky. Okay, so now I'm going to do one more with you together, and then I'm going to ask you to do the worksheets that I have put on the file for today. So I would now like you to do this time I'm asking you to shade in 2/5. That's what that fraction is called. It's called 2/5, that fraction. Okay, now when you're shading in fractions of shapes, you don't actually need to know too much about what that fraction means. You can see it once you've done it onto the shape, but actually if you use what I've taught you, you look at the top number 2 and you look at the bottom number 5. So I know I need to shade 2 out of every 5. Okay, so again I'm going to go 1. Yes, I need to shade 1. 2. Yes, I need to shade 2. 3. No. 4. No. 5. No. 1. Yes. 2. Yes. 3. No. 4. No. 5. No. So we have now shaded 2/5 of our shape. Look, we've done 1, 2, yes, 3, no, 4, no, 5, no, 1, yes, 2, yes, 3, no, 4, no, 5, no. Okay, so we have shaded 2/5. Okay, we've actually shaded 4 bits out of 8. But again, if we halve those, we get 2 and 4, which is 4 out of 10. And if we halve those, we get 2 and we get 5. Okay, so 4/10 is the same as 2/5. Okay, now I have put some worksheets in your folder for today on fractions of shapes. So I'd like you to have a go at those and see how you get on. Let me know how you're getting on, and if you want to, you can do some of your own afterwards and show me. That would be amazing. Okay, Year 1, I will see you next week for maths. Take care. Bye.